that says that water should be a matter that is dealt centrally. And the framers of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, were very right, because only local people will be able to understand the specific needs of water of their own people. If you now take the powers from the county governments and you bring them to Nairobi, number one, there will be a lot of bureaucracy. People will not be able to make decisions in terms of the needs of the water. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I've heard my good friend, the chair of Energy, saying that county governments will not have budgets to be able to deal with these issues. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about the issue of bulk water management, if there is water in Murang'a County and the people of Nairobi are benefiting from that water of Murang'a County, because we are the house that defends devolution and the framers of the Constitution, unless my good chair wants to amend the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution devolved water. The best thing we can do is to empower the county government of Murang'a to ensure that they sell that water to the people of Nairobi. It is not quantum physics. It is very simple. You have bulk water. If you have dilapidated infrastructure, I will fix my infrastructure up to the borderline. You want to collect my water, Mr. Speaker? Collect it from the borderline, go and distribute it to your people. This business of creating these authorities, which are really bankrupting this nation, if you go to all state departments, Mr. Speaker, right now, it is not that the national budget gives them so much money. Most of them are given loans by the World Bank. They are given loans by the IMF. They are given loans by other development agencies for them to be able to go and sit somewhere in Naivasha and make decisions about people in Narok or how much water they should get. Mr. Speaker, we are missing the point here. This is not only unconstitutional, but it is creating bureaucracies on managing everything, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this Kenya Kwanza government really shocks me. You know, every time I sit down here and I read, you know, you look at, even if this bill was due, or this act was due to, for it to be amended.
Lekina, there is a point of order from Senator Derito John Kinyua. What is your point of order, Senator Kinyua?
Mr. Speaker, I have listened to Senator Olekina, who I respect so much. I don't know he's casting...
Which is standing order that you are using to
Mr. Speaker, Senator Wamatinga, when he finished his statement, he said, with amendment. So I don't know, he's not agree.
What is your point? Which standing order now are you using to prosecute?
Standing order number 110, Mr. Speaker, that if what Matangi said, he's just agreeing with him because he's assuming that Senator Matangi made a mistake. Well, Senator Matangi is very clear with with all respect. Matinga. No. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's Senator Matinga. Senator, it's true, Mr. Speaker. But Senator Matinga was very clear when he said he's supporting with amendment. Concerning the issue of water is devolved, he's very clear about devolution with water, Mr. Speaker. I just want clarification so that he doesn't want to assume, he doesn't want to say that Senator Wamatinga does not respect water is devolved, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Olekina, proceed, and if you have to clarify, I don't know, I did not...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my point is very clear, and I just want to be very, very clear. You know, we are debating, so it's for me to either agree or reject. And in my debate, I just pointed out clearly that what my good friend, the chair of Energy, has said does not hold any water, because he said county governments do not have budgets to be able to control their resources. And I said, even the national government is relying on the IMF and the World Bank to borrow loans. And the object and memorandum of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is very clear. And I hope that my good friend, the commissioner, can be able to read it. It says, the principal object of the bill is to amend the Water Act 2016 for the purpose of operationalizing public-private partnership in the water sector. And I said, which I continue, that I have a serious problem with the policies of this Kenya Kwanza government, because everything has become commercial. Mr. Speaker, the power that now are being given to the cabinet secretary here, and the cabinet secretary does not really care about county government of Meru.
There is another point of order from Senator Wamatinga Wahome.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to inform my colleague that I did not say that the county government do not have the budget. I said with the kind of allocation that the county governments get. That is point of information. With the kind of allocation that the county governments get.
Has he accepted that?
Yes, he has accepted. Yes, he's accepted.
Mr. Speaker, you know, my chair, him and I just came out from another committee where we were concerned about the cabinet secretary's decision and the powers that they have. But that's for another day. Let me try and summarize my points as follows. Mr. Speaker, I firmly believe that it's about time, with the help of the Secretariat, that we set up a committee that scrutinizes bills that are seconded to this House from the National Assembly. And I say that because of the experience of the bills that we send from this House to the National Assembly. Most of the bills that we send from this House to the National Assembly, some of them either do not get concurrence, and those that get concurrence are not prioritized. In fact, most of the time, they are sent to the budget office for them to look at it. They look at the implication. So I think in the same spirit, we should also be looking at the constitutionality of legislation proposals that are brought from the National Assembly. We should not be quick to debate them and to pass them. Because the first thing we should have seen is that the Constitution, under Section 4, Roman numeral number 11, that county governments, the county public works and services, including water and sanitation services, are devolved. So unless you're telling us that you're going to amend this Constitution, or you're going to throw this Constitution out of the way, there's absolutely no way that these amendments will be able to hold. If we are pushed to pass these amendments, someone will go to court, and someone will ask the same question that I'm asking here today. Why can't we not empower Murang'a County, which is providing water to Nairobi County, to be able to sell that water and make money for the people of Murang'a? Why should we create another body that has the powers to borrow money so that it continue dipping us deeper into the hole of debt? Mr. Speaker, the advantage of leaving water services, the county governments, are very clear. It allows for proper public participation. It allows for the people on these counties to be able to get water because they know they are the only ones who understand their needs of water. Now, if you tell me that decisions will be made in Nairobi, with all this bureaucracy, by the time water is distributed in Narok, you know, a child would have already finished primary school and gone to high school. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this bill is ill-advised. I think we need to start thinking about the future of this nation. One thing which I want us to remember is that governments come and go. Politicians come and go. But this country called Kenya must remain and will always remain. So this year, since we have agreed to be able to debate issues, pass legislation that will be able to support this nation, we must come up with amendments to the law that will be future-centric. It will not be laws that will be able to enrich a few individuals. Because the moment you say, that you are now going to empower, because it says that amendment to Clause 6 of the bill on Section 69 Act provides clarity roles between waterworks development agencies and water service provider. What clarity are you seeking there? Water service providers are based in counties. These water agencies that you're giving them so much power, really, what do? It's just busybodies. People just sitting down somewhere and making decisions about water in Mandera, and they're not even in Mandera, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to beseech my colleagues that one, either we stop the debate on this bill, we look at the constitutionality of this bill, because it is affecting our counties. And we're here to protect and defend counties. We need to start thinking about how to promote innovations and flexibility. If we take away a resource from the counties and we now bring it to the central government or the national government to make decisions, how then are we going to become innovative? How are we going to promote, flexibility in terms of managing water resources, which are based locally? You'll find that it's very difficult. Someone will get water, but instead of sharing that water with the local community, they will just, because they're afraid of these waterworks, they will just use that water for themselves. They'll never say it. Yet these waterworks do not have the powers. So this issue of private-public partnership must stop. It is not always the right thing. If you tell me that you're building me a super highway from Nairobi to Kakamega, and you are inviting private-public partnership on a BOT, build, operate, transfer, I'll support it. But if you're now telling me that you want to commercialize water, that you are bringing in a private party to come in and invest in that water, and then distribute that water, use that water, which is a resource that the county is supposed to be benefiting, I will say no to it. Because you will say you'll actually just throw away innovation. We keep on talking about not having jobs in this country. So instead of these 47 heads of counties sitting down together and saying, how do we manage this resource? We in Parliament are now promoting, clawing back on devolution. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to end by saying local communities have a better understanding of their specific water needs, and by leaving these water services as intended by the framers of the Constitution in the county governments, will help them tailor the management of this water resource to fit their needs. So, Mr. Speaker, I oppose this bill entirely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next is Senator Munyi Haji Mohamed.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia msaada wa marekebisho wa sheria ya maji ya mwaka 2016. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza ningejiunga na wenzangu ambao wametangulia kwa kusema kwamba napinga marekebisho haya, kwa sababu maji ni haki ya msingi ya kila mwanadamu, na kwa Wakenya ni katika haki zetu za msingi. Kwa hivyo mswada huu unajaribu kuweka maji kama biashara ambayo itasababisha wananchi wa Kenya kukosa maji na vile vile pia kupata tabu katika kupata maji. Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia mfumo wa sasa, kwa mfano kule Pwani kuna Coast Water Services ambayo inamilikiwa na serikali kuu. Halafu katika kila county kuna shirika ambalo linatoa maji, linauza maji, ambayo kwa mfano Mombasa ni Mombasa Water and Sewerage Services, ambazo wananunua maji kutoka kwa Coast Water na wanauzia wananchi wa Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, wananchi wa Mombasa. Mheshimiwa Spika, iwapo huu mswada utapita, ina maana kwamba Coast Water Services Board watakuwa na uhuru wa kuuza maji yale kwa wingi kwa mtu binafsi ama kwa shirika la kibinafsi, na wale ndio watakuja kuuzia wananchi kwa bei ambayo ni ya juu. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sasa asilimia kubwa ya wakazi wa Mombasa hawapati maji kwa sababu kwanza maji yanayokuja yenyewe kutoka chemchemi ya Savo ni kidogo na yale yanayotoka Malindi pia ni kidogo. Kwa hivyo haikimu mahitaji ya watu wa Mombasa. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu hapo itapita itatoa nafasi kubwa kwa wawekezaji wa binafsi kuuza maji kwa bei ya juu, na kwa vile maji ni kitu cha muhimu kwa maisha ya binadamu, Mheshimiwa Spika, hiyo itakuwa ni kinyume na usalama wa nchi, kwa sababu wananchi wakikosa maji, hiyo itaathiri usalama wao na usalama wa nchi kwa jumla. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la pili ni kwamba kuna shirika ambalo linaitwa Water Storage Authority. Tukiangalia kwa sasa kila sehemu, hakuna sehemu ambayo tunaweza kusema wanaweza kupata maji kwa masaa 24 siku 7 kwa wiki. Kaunti zote, hata Murang'a pia wana changamoto za kuweza kutekeleza hiyo. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, twaunda shirika la kuhifadhi maji, kustore maji. Litakuwa na kazi gani Mheshimiwa Spika? Tukiangalia kwa mfano kule Pwani, chemchemi ya Savo imekuwa hivyo, ina pipe moja kutoka 1945 ilipoanzishwa mpaka sasa 2024. Serikali imeshindwa kuweka hata pipe moja kutoka Savo kuja kwa mfano Voi ama kuja Mombasa ama kuja Kilifi. Wakati Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiangalia makazi yamekuwa ilivyokuwa 1945 Mheshimiwa Spika, si kama ilivyo leo, kwa sababu ukiangalia kuna miji kadhaa imeweza kukua kutoka Savo, kutoka Mtito Ndei Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu chemchemi ya Mzima Mheshimiwa Spika iko nyuma ya Mtito Ndei. Kwa hivyo kutoka hapo Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia barabara mpaka Mombasa, kuna miji mingi ambayo imeweza kukua kutoka 1945 mpaka sasa, na wote hawa wanategemea pipe moja hiyo ya Mzima Springs. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hakuna haja ya kuwa na shirika ambalo litakuwa linahifadhi haya maji, kwa sababu tumeona kwamba kwa sasa hakuna maji ya kutosha ya kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba kila binadamu au kila mwananchi na wanyama pia katika mbuga zetu za wanyamapori wanapata maji ya kutosha kwa matumizi yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, napinga mswada huu na nitakomea hapo. Asante kwa kunipa fursa hii.
Senator Edwin Sifuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to begin by stating that I stand to oppose the bill in its entirety. I will start with the principal object of the bill, Mr. Speaker. I have a problem with the principal object of the bill. The principal object of the bill is stated to be operationalization of private-public partnerships in the water sector. Mr. Speaker, we in Nairobi here have had a taste of perhaps the most famous public-private partnership in the country today, and that is the expressway between Mlolongo and Westlands. Many of the people who can afford to use a toll road will tell you that it has improved their lives. But for the many people in Nairobi who cannot afford to pay toll, I can tell you that the feedback is that the expressway has actually made commuting between Mlolongo and Westlands on the old road extremely difficult and even harder than it was before the expressway was built. Mr. Speaker, this is in addition to a debate we had here last year where the public had to fork out extra money. I think it was about 19 billion shillings for the rehabilitation of the old Mombasa Road. This is after the private partnership was already in operation and the people with money were enjoying the services of the expressway because they could afford it. Mr. Speaker, I am not against privatization per se, and privatization is not bad in every instance. But I honestly believe that there are some sectors and some things that we should not privatize because of the negative effect it has on the public sector delivery of those same services. I remember when privatization of education began, and many will argue for and against privatization in the education sector. But the general consensus, at least from my perspective, is that it has had a negative effect on service delivery in the public sector. Mr. Speaker, it is also arguable whether privatization of healthcare has resulted in better services, especially in the public sector. Anytime you introduce commercial interest in essential services, Mr. Speaker, the public service, the free service always suffers. So here we are discussing privatization in the water sector. Privatization in the water sector, for me, is undesirable for many reasons. But, Mr. Speaker, those who said water is life knew what they were talking about. If you cannot afford water, you basically cannot afford life. If we are going to be made to pay for life, which is essentially what we are being told is going to happen with the privatization of water, then we are making life itself more expensive and more unbearable. I will give you the example of the water demand in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. As of March 2022, our daily demand in Nairobi is 810 million liters per day. Mr. Speaker, this is against the installed supply capacity of 550 liters a day. We have a deficit of 260 million liters for the residents of Nairobi. Now, you imagine, Mr. Speaker, a situation where at least this 550 million liters of water a day is assured, not even assured, at least it is there on paper for the people of Nairobi. Now, with the passage of this bill, because it is assured because it is in the hands of the public sector, it is in the hands of Nairobi City Water Sewerage Company, which is an entity owned by the county government of Nairobi, which is an entity that belongs to the people of the county of Nairobi. Now, this bill passes and it says that a private entity, people with capacity and money, people with muscle, can be able to come and say, out of the 550 liters of water that Nairobi gets a day, we have the capacity to buy half of that amount of water. Say 200 million liters per day goes with a private entity because that is what you have empowered them to do through the bulk purchases that are being proposed in this amendment. What that does is that the public can only rely on Nairobi Water to supply 300,000 liters of water per day because 200,000 are now in the hands of a private company. Then what happens to that private company? Those private companies will not prioritize the majority of the people of Nairobi who cannot afford to buy water, even at the current rates that have been imposed by the Nairobi City County Water and Sewerage Company. Mr. Speaker, you will be commercializing life itself in this city so that those with the capacity to buy the water, just like the people who can be able to afford to fly over the poor on the expressway in Nairobi are doing right now, will be able to purchase all the water that is available in Nairobi, and the people will suffer, the ordinary people who are the majority in this county. Mr. Speaker, this is why I'm saying that this is one of those areas that should not be commercialized, that in fact it is an essential service. You must distinguish between essential services and other services. The people of Nairobi can survive in traffic, but you cannot survive without water, Mr. Speaker. Number two, there is no provision, having painted that picture, Mr. Speaker, there is no provision that will then determine that or put in place a mechanism for equity. Yes, you have the financial muscle to buy all the water in Nairobi, but should we allow you to do it because you have the capacity to do it? What happens to all the other people who are not able to be loaded onto this private entity that will be supplying water? So the equity mechanism, I don't see it in the bill. It would have been nice if they were told that for you to get that commercial enterprise, you must develop extra capacity. Extra capacity has to be developed first before we give you contracts to supply water commercially. But if they are coming to eat into the already or the current installed capacity, which I've already demonstrated to you, already has a deficit, then we are going to have problems, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I had opportunity to have a conversation at some point with the Director General of the Nairobi City Water County, Water and Sewerage Board, Engineer Muguna. And he tried to explain to me, now that this is already a scarce commodity, How do you determine who gets water and who doesn't? And there is a very complex matrix that they use there, Mr. Speaker. Of course, you will see that they will prioritize important security installations. They will prioritize the CBD because they want to encourage businesses to happen. You don't want major conferences happening at, say, the KICC, international conferences, and then there's no water in the CBD. You don't want to have a situation that you don't have water at your international airports, for instance. You have seen the outrage that follows when there is a blackout at JKIA. The same for water, because it's an essential commodity. And then you come to the regions in Nairobi. Who gets water on which day? Who doesn't get water on what day? Because we are already facing a deficit, Mr. Speaker. So this commercialization, I believe, is going to make Engineer Muguna's work even worse. If you take away any single drop of water from the capacity that is installed right now, the people at Nairobi Water are going to have a problem on who gets water on which days and who doesn't get water, and there are going to be people who will not get water at all, simply because the commercial interests, the commercial entities that will be running that water supply will be determining who gets that water, and it is going to be a commercial relationship. If you have the money, you will get the water every time in the quantities that you want. But if you are not able to afford, you are on your own. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, there is a concern about the loss of revenue to the entities that are owned by the county government. Mr. Speaker, loss of revenue also translates to loss of jobs. Many workers currently working at the county-owned water services companies are concerned, Mr. Speaker, that once you shift a bulk of the supply of water to private hands, there is no guarantee that their jobs will continue to be tenable. It is very possible that we are staring at job losses. And there is no mechanism in the bill, as currently drafted, Mr. Speaker, to ring fence or to protect the people currently working at Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company, so that after these commercial contracts have been signed, after the water is now in private hands, after these private companies are the ones running the water business, is there any guarantee that the people working for the Nairobi County Water and Sewerage Company will continue to be in employment? I have not seen that assurance in the bill. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the question of infrastructure that has been touched on by some of my colleagues. We have already worked and invested a lot of money as a county in Nairobi to put in place the infrastructure, not just for the collection of water, but actually for the distribution of water. Is there any provision in the bill that assures us that the commercial interests, the commercial companies, once they take over the bulk water, will develop their own distribution infrastructure? Will that infrastructure be flying on top of our existing infrastructure the way that the expressway does? What is it going to do to the infrastructure that already exists? If there are disruptions in service because of ongoing construction of parallel infrastructure, who is going to bear the cost of repairs? Are we going to be told again as taxpayers in Nairobi to bear the cost of repairs to our existing infrastructure because of construction of new infrastructure, just like we were told to bear the cost of repairing the old Mombasa Road? I have not been assured in the current bill that any of those things have been thought about. Mr. Speaker, I had my governor, Johnson Sakaja, just recently in a church service, saying that we have secured as a city 15 billion shillings for new water projects, which is to increase the capacity of the city county to be able to provide this precious commodity. I don't know where that leaves us. Is this 15 billion shillings supposed to be for the people of Nairobi, for the development of the capacity of Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company? Or we are doing this so that we can be able to enable private entities to come in as suppliers of water? Mr. Speaker, there's a project that is ongoing called the Northern Collector Tunnel. At the completion of the first phase, we are expecting an additional 140 million liters of water per day. That is going to maybe dent the deficit of 220 million liters a day by about half. There is still need for development of further capacity for the people of Nairobi to enjoy water on a daily basis in the quantities that they desire. What is going to happen if this bill becomes law? Mr. Speaker, I want to stop there because I am not convinced. I am not convinced, in addition to the questions raised by my colleagues about the fact that this being a devolved function, the national government is overreaching. It's overreaching in its attempt to manage the water sector, yet the 4th schedule of the Constitution specifies water and water services as a devolved function. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I stand to oppose the bill in its entirety, and I've heard people telling us that if you are unhappy with provisions of the bill, you can bring amendments. I am one of those people who has brought amendments to bills that I thought were unfavorable, unconstitutional, and overreaching in their provisions. But those very same amendments have been defeated here. And the question I'm asking myself, how do you amend something that is fundamentally flawed from the beginning? I want to convince my colleagues that please don't tell us to amend something that is unconstitutional. You don't amend something that is unconstitutional to make it constitutional. You throw it away, you throw it out. That is the only solution for unconstitutional provisions of a bill that, such as the one that we are dealing with here. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna. Senator Roba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to weigh in on this bill, on the Water Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, before I either oppose or support this bill, I want to say that my biggest worry with this bill is that we are taking away from devolution, that we are going back to centralizing matters that have already been devolved. When I read some of the amendments, particularly just a statement such as the one there on 2A, at the national government level, a state department, agency, or state corporation which intends to have its functions undertaken by a private party. We are basically saying that after the introduction of devolution and after devolving functions for purposes of efficiency, such that the people on the county and the grassroots these matters, and not only are we centralizing it, it's also we want to commercialize it. Now, do I have a problem with it, with water being commercialized? I don't think the problem is water being commercialized. The question then becomes, by commercializing this service, are we actually bringing the cost down? Are we ensuring that now all the Kenyans in every single part of this country are receiving the water? That is the main question, because some people will say we don't want to commercialize it. But if you look at some of the things that we're dealing with under Kenya Power, we are always pushing to have it commercialized so that we can have competition, so that we can have so many other players to bring down the cost of electricity. So commercializing it is not the problem. The problem is, are we actually, in the guise of making amendments, centralizing back powers that have been devolved and making the provision of water more expensive? Because when I read through this proposed bill, I tend to have a feeling that we are trying to even move it closer to the problems such as the KPLC problems that we have right now. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that provision of basic needs, water included there, being a basic need, we must ask ourselves whether we are amending for the interests of Kenyans or whether we are amending for the interests of very few players in a commercial space, Mr. Speaker. I have heard Senator Sifuna talking about the investment that national government and even county governments have put on infrastructure for provision of water. It takes me back to a time when we have been able to see certain individuals using government offices to go and give crazy proposals to seek loans for purposes of investment of infrastructure for whatever field. In this particular point, this agency that we want to create will have the power, the mandate to go out, seek loans, stating that they want to bring development in terms of infrastructure of water, But then how do we account and how do we make sure that those loans do not, trickle down to now the mwananchi? At the end of the day, you'll be told, now maji imepanda, the water has gone up because of the loans that we took on infrastructure. I think if we're talking about ensuring that water provision is being is effective down to the grassroots, then let us talk about all these amendments, but from a grassroots and a devolved perspective, such that if we're talking about having PPPs, private-public partnerships, let us talk about PPPs on a county, on a devolved unit, so that we are not losing the water service providers in terms of now centralizing them back to a national government and then having them negotiate with national government on provision of water to their people. Mr. Speaker, for me, it is imperative that the fundamental question here is, are we legislating for the interests of Kenyan people, for Kenyans, or the interest of a few individuals who want to commercialize a specific industry for their own benefit? Mr. Speaker, when I read some of the clauses in this bill, I just begin to wonder, first of all, why this bill originated from the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, anytime we are proposing bills here in the Senate and they touch on issues to do with money, it is even the legal departments that will advise you that, Mheshimiwa, this bill you are trying to legislate is actually a money bill and should therefore originate from the National Assembly. In that same spirit, I am wondering why there is a bill that is touching on devolution and county assemblies originating from the National Assembly. Yet, the Senate is mandated to oversight issues on county assemblies and devolution. So it also, I then question, whoever, and with all due respect, because we are all legislators, why did this bill originate from the National Assembly? This is something that we should have been, as senators, been allowed to discuss at the Senate, because it touches particularly on devolved functions and on county assemblies and county governments, so that we can say, okay, yes, we need to make the space of water provision efficient for Kenyans. So let us sit down as legislators who are oversighting county governments and devolved units and talk about how to make water provision more effective for Kenyans. So, Mr. Speaker, I think having said that, when I stood, I was not sure whether I was supporting or I was opposing. I actually stood, I said, you know what, let me just speak my mind, and then maybe at the end of it I will know. But the more I speak and the more I put my points there, I know that this is a bill that has been fronted by the majority leader, and but I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I oppose this bill. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I have got communication to make with regards to our visiting institution. And in the public gallery, we have 48 students accompanied by 6 teachers from Lesiruo Secondary School in Kericho County who are undertaking an educational visit in the Senate. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you, and I would request the Majority Whip on behalf of the Senator for Kericho to also, under 1 minute, welcome the delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Leader of the Majority, who is also the Senator for Kericho, I would like to welcome the young people to the Senate. I know you are going to miss him. You would have loved to see him debate. He's a very good debater here. And on his behalf, I want to assure you that you come from a unique community, a sporting community, and as young children, I'm sure many of you would have wanted to run like Kelvin Kiptum. The entire Senate is also mourning with you young people from that area, and we wish you well. I hope one of you will fit the large shoes of Kiptum, the late, because you seem to have the DNA of running. Not that I envy you, I also come from a community with the DNA of playing soccer. So, Mr. Speaker, my pleasure, and I wish the young people well and a good stay in the Senate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Majority Whip. Senator Osotsi Godfrey Atieno, sorry.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that opportunity. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to declare that I'm going to oppose this bill. Mr. Speaker, I have had an opportunity as a chair of the County Public Investment and Special Funds Committee to have audit review sessions with over 80 water service providers in this country. And my committee has done a wonderful job to try and deal with the challenges that we have noted. And the challenges are not just management challenges, but also we have other challenges which, if addressed, will be able to sort out the problem we have had with the water provision in our counties. In these review meetings, Mr. Speaker, we have noted that the water service providers in our counties were seen to be autonomous from the county government, because the Ministry of Water was dealing directly with the water service providers and overlooking the county governments. But we have been able, Mr. Speaker, successfully to take away ownership of these water companies from the boards of those water companies to the county governments. And Mr. Speaker, this has had a great effect on the issue of provision of water. One example, Mr. Speaker, a county where water service provision was being managed badly was your own county, Mr. Speaker. The other one was Murang'a County, where cartels were running water companies without the involvement of county government. We have been able to take it back to the county government and made a raft of recommendations on how these water companies should run. Mr. Speaker, when I read this bill, all that efforts that we have done as a committee are going to waste, because this bill tries to do the contrary. Mr. Speaker, because of the challenges that we noted when we were looking at the audit reports, we decided as a committee to do an inquiry on water investments in our counties. And we invited the regional waterworks companies. We have invited WASREB. We have invited WASPA, which is an association of water service providers. We have invited the Ministry of Water. We have invited the Treasury. We have invited the Attorney General. And Mr. Speaker, this Friday, we are going to have an engagement as a committee with the Council of Governors Committee on Water, where 7 governors are going to attend. And in this meeting, we are going to discuss what are the possible solutions of dealing with these challenges in the water sector. But Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that this bill is being rushed in this House, whereas a committee of this House is seeking solutions which it will bring to this House for debate. And this bill is running contrary to what we are doing. I want to give you an example, Mr. Speaker. We have the regional waterworks companies. We have the Rift Valley Waterworks, Central Rift Waterworks, North Rift Waterworks. We have Northern Kenya Waterworks. We have Lake Victoria North and Victoria South. We have Coast Water. We have Tanathi. We have Athi Water. Mr. Speaker, I want to say in this house, following our engagement with this waterworks company, this regional waterworks company are a waste to this country. What they do, Mr. Speaker, is that they only sit there to write proposals to get funding from donors. Then once the money comes, they build water projects without the engagement of counties, and then they purport to hand over those water projects to counties, just a mere letter. And in those agreements, governors are not involved in negotiating those agreements. It's only the Treasury. The Ministry of Water is involved, but the counties are not involved. And then they come and build waterworks, then they leave them there idle, or they hand over to themselves. Mr. Speaker, we have found out that the loans that were taken by these water companies have never been repaid. Billions of money. They have never been repaid. But what this bill is doing is simply giving those companies more powers. More powers in bulk water supply, more powers in even doing what county water service providers are supposed to be doing. So as Senator Sifuna is saying, we are going to see a situation where water service providers in the counties are going to die. People are going to lose employment. And now, effectively, it will mean that the regional waterworks companies, which belong to the national government, will basically be doing 100% work of providing water in our counties. Are we going to sit here as a Senate to approve this fraud? Of course, no. Article 96 of the Constitution empowers us to protect counties. Mr. Speaker, and I want to implore my colleagues, if we pass this bill here today, we will basically be saying this country does not need the Senate. We better go home. If we can allow ourselves to pass this bill, that is the verdict the people of Kenya are going to say about us. Mr. Speaker, the issue of bulk water supply. Bulk water supply cannot be a national government function only. Allow the counties to develop capacities to do bulk water supply. But this bill simply limits that to the national government by giving that role to the regional waterworks authorities and the storage water authority. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about privatization, we all support privatization. But we must know that public-private partnerships are not cheap, they're expensive. So what we are going to see is a scenario where the cost of water is going to shoot up. It's going to go up. The moment we pass this bill, that is what is going to happen. Mr. Speaker, this House exists to protect devolution. But the biggest enemy of devolution in this country, and I want to say it today, is the bureaucrats in government. They are the ones who scheme to bring such bills to this House. If you are not careful, you pass them. But once you pass them, you are passing corruption. The billions of money that Kenyan people have been forced to borrow on those water projects that have not been paid, this bill is going to sanitize that. Mr. Speaker, I would request my colleagues, if you allow, that this bill be stood down. Allow the committee that was doing this work to bring a report to this House, read it through, see the challenges, look at the solutions, then we can look at this bill, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you are going to appreciate that this bill is the worst bill I have ever seen since I started working as a member of parliament. It will not just take water provision to the national government, but is going to create worse problems in the water sector. When you say the regulation of water, which has been done by this WASREB, and we have had problems with the WASREB, because WASREB is regulating water, but is a national body which is being financed by water service providers which are in counties. They don't receive any budget from the exchequer. They don't receive any exchequer from the national government, but they are financed by the water service providers which are based in counties. And now you are saying that these people are now the ones who are going to license who provides bulk water, including private companies. And at the same time, they are being financed by county governments. Mr. Speaker, we have to relook at these things in totality and make the right decision, and I believe the right decision is total rejection of this bill. And we are not talking politics here, my colleagues from the other side. It is not politics. This is basically one devolution, which every senator here, regardless of which political party brought you to this house, you have a role to protect devolution. Number two, we do not want to be part of the mess that the Senate that passed this motion has created more mess in the water sector than resolving the problems. Mr. Speaker, allow us to go and handle the engagement with the COG and do a report which we will bring to this house that members can go through, and it is going to be the best guide to deal with this challenge that we have before us because of having an engagement with over 80 water service providers and also the various entities in the water sector so that we give you the best way forward. Mr. Speaker, I oppose.
Thank you so much, Senator Osotsi. I call upon Senator Abbas Mohammed.
Honorable Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Actually, it's a very unfortunate situation. Yesterday when I was talking here, I said devolution is under attack. And one of the team that wants to capture this house is the leadership in the National Assembly. It's a very unfortunate situation that the National Assembly now become a renegade to the welfare of Kenyans. That bills have been hashed, and actually it is actually detrimental to the welfare of Kenyans. Water is a very essential service, commodity. It's a natural gift from God. We don't object to commercialize it, but unfortunately, how it is done is not acceptable. Because water is totally devolved function. We have got over 20 water agencies in this country. We don't even know what they do. They use a lot of taxpayers' money. And as rightly said by my colleague Osisi, they get loans, the money is misused, and nobody is paying it. It's just the taxpayers' money is actually being held in custody. And I don't know when we're going to pay that money. Now, the thing I'm seeing now, the only thing remaining to tax or to commercialize is the air we breathe. Because everything is being commercialized. It's not bad, but you must choose what you want to commercialize in this world, this country. And I pray that the air we breathe will not be commercialized. Otherwise, as it is, it's a very unfortunate situation. Honorable Speaker, water is life, an essential service. Because if you now commercialize water, especially the bulk water, Kenyans are surviving on irrigation. The food that we take, the sugar that we harvest, everything is actually being used for irrigation is water from the rivers. If you commercialize this water, then food production cost increases, the cost of food increases, the accessibility to water becomes very costly. And this country, I don't know where we're going to end now. So, Honorable Speaker, there will be a lot of restrictions. You see, just take an example. Kenya Power Lighting has some dams around Embu, many places. Sometimes those that community goes without water. The water is in the dam, the next neighborhood does not have water. So if you now want to commercialize each and every single cubic meter of water, then it's going to be very unfortunate. The Honorable Speaker, that bill is actually in bad taste, and it will be rejected in totality. For one, I am coming from a pastoral area. Tomorrow when we say that the bulk water will be commercialized, my animals cannot access the river. We cannot afford to pay. We can't afford to pay water. Animals will die. Yeah? Because the rivers now will be restricted. The dams will be restricted. So we're going to miss water for animals. Because now it's been actually, we're complaining of drought and all these things. Tomorrow when water is commercialized, then I think the most disadvantaged people will be my own community who keep animals at large numbers. And about 20% of the Kenya now thrive on those animals. Therefore, you know, we have been told that we are going to build low-cost housing. A very good idea. Yes, that's so that Kenyans can access affordable houses. What is happening today? Houses have been demolished. People are missing their own houses. The same houses that have been constructed, is not going to the poor. It is not going to the owner of the house that you demolished. So what are you doing? So this is actually, unfortunately, a very, very unfortunate situation. I think there's a lot of affinity for commercialization. Yes, we have no problem if it's going to bring development. But you must actually digest whatever action the government is going to take. And I want to tell our colleagues in the National Assembly, stop being renegade to this country, that they want to take and handle everything. And I said the other day, yesterday, when I said that the Devolution is under attack, this is actually one of the things that's going to finish devolution. Because, honestly, you see, you are giving somebody who has never invested in any of the area. The rivers are flowing. The labs have been done in Wajir, done in Nyeri, in Muranga, and everywhere. Then somebody just comes with a bag of money, takes over the water, he benefits out of it and makes a business out of it, billions out of it. This is what's happening in the housing business. The low-cost houses, the government land is taken, it is not valued, it is not costed, it is just taken freely. Somebody builds a house, he sells to you again. So what are we doing here? Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I think, you know, I was just talking the other day, I was looking at a TV, what's happening now in Israel and Gaza. The Gaza cannot even access the rivers. So if you give to a commercial person these rivers and these dams you're talking about, then you will never access water again. You can see what's happening in Nairobi. We are thriving on water boozers. This city does not even have, the water is there, it's flowing. The water is there, available, but this is commercialized. So everybody has bought a water boozer, the taps are closed, and then we're buying water at a very expensive cost, I mean a high cost. So with those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abbas. Calling upon Senator Muma Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to speak to this bill. Mr. Speaker, we all know that water is a devolved function. Mr. Speaker, currently we have a number of water companies that have been providing services, and Mr. Speaker, we need to be transitioning to a level where water services are fully devolved. This bill, as provided, is in bad taste, in my view. Mr. Speaker, when this government came in, one of the things they promised was to support devolution fully. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say to our team in the majority side that this bill does not support devolution. In fact, it reverses devolution. Mr. Speaker, I am a vice chair in the Devolution and Intergovernmental Relations Committee. One of the things we've been trying to do is to get a meeting with the national government department in charge of devolution to actually churn a way out in which we can establish better intergovernmental relations between national government and county governments. My suggestion is that this meeting is long overdue. I can see my chair, Honorable Abbas, is there. It will be important to pass some level of sensitization by the Senate to the national government around the issue of devolution. Otherwise, we will keep passing laws that are going to be stopped in courts. And then the courts will be under attack for failing or stopping the implementation of laws, and yet they will have done their job to protect devolution. Mr. Speaker, this law is one such law that requires that we have a proper conversation. It is purporting to bring in matters PPP, but this country has a law on PPP. A law that itself needs actually to be amended because it has...
Honorable Senators, we may rise. It is now 1 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 14th of February, 2024 at 2:30 p.m.
Provide proper facilities in order to facilitate you to carry out your constitutional mandate in a suitable environment. Honorable members, you will further recall that on the 21st November 2023, I directed the clerk to circulate to all members the revised members' rules for the members' restaurant. I now instruct the clerk to publish the rules and instruct alongside the clerk of the Senate and the Director General to ensure they are enforced. I also urge all members to observe the said rules, particularly Rule number 3, seating restrictions, Rule number 4, admissions of visitors, Rule number 5, dress code, Rule number 6, conduct of members, and Rule number 7, conduct of visitors. In conclusion, honorable members, as we embark on the legislative agenda of the National Assembly, for the third session, I urge you all to carry out the sacrosanct duty of being representatives of the people with all dedication. I also wish you success individually as members and collectively as a House as you carry out this noble national duty for the welfare of our people. And I truly wish that from now on we'll have no quorum hitch at the beginning of every session of the House. I thank you. Members at the bar, take your seats. Hold your horses, Senior Counsel. Take your seats, honorable members. Order. Freeze where you are, those who are in the walkway. Order, honorable members. Order. The Honorable Jeho. Is it Jeho? Eh? Odugon. I'm sure by now you know when the speaker is on his feet or her feet, there's no walking around by members. You freeze where you are. Honorable members have a short communication to recognize a visiting delegation from the National Assembly of Zambia. Honorable members, I wish to introduce to you a delegation from the National Assembly of Zambia, comprising of the first Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Chisangano Malungo, MP, the second Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Moyo Moses Frank, MP. Honorable members, the delegation is accompanied by 6 officers of the National Assembly of Zambia, led by the Deputy Clerk, Mr. Stephen Kawimbe. The delegation is in the country on a study visit to benchmark on the mental health practices and policies that the Parliament of Kenya has put in place for members and staff. The delegation seeks to learn ways of addressing systemic challenges and mitigation measures on mental health at the workplace. Honorable members, on my behalf and that of the Assembly, I welcome them to the House of Parliament and wish them fruitful engagements during their stay. I thank you. Yes, Honorable Senior Counsel Otienda Mola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the other members make their way to the chamber, I rise under Standing Order number 1, as read with Standing Order number 29. If the Honorable Wamboka Wanami will take his seat, I will prosecute my point shortly. Mr. Speaker, under Standing Order number 1, it gives you discretion to give direction on any matter not expressly provided for. Under Standing Order number 29, it allows a member or members to request the leader of majority and or the leader of minority for a special sitting. Mr. Speaker, as you may recall, a significant number of members, totaling 41, did request a special sitting to discuss the very important matter of non-disbursement of CDF funds in this country. Mr. Speaker, that communication issued on 1st of February and was duly copied to your office. Mr. Speaker, we have today resumed our regular sittings, but without a response or directions on that request. So the first point of direction, Mr. Speaker, is for you to guide where members who themselves are the one to sit request a special sitting and it is not constituted. How should that request be treated? Mr. Speaker, secondly, your direction on another important thing. On the 5th of December 2023, Mr. Speaker, at the continued push by members, you did issue communication, having been given information that the funds would be disbursed before the end of December. That was on 5th of December. It now appears, Mr. Speaker, that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury may have misled our Speaker. Where a Cabinet Secretary who is answerable to this House misleads the leader of this House, how should we treat that? Mr. Speaker, I know that we are yet to constitute the House Business Committee. But, Mr. Speaker, this is an important matter where we need direction, because the directions that we are given or we take may well constitute our consideration of whether the House Business Committee as proposed is appropriate or not. Mr. Speaker, with respect, I do not imagine what other businesses we can be discussing when Kenyans are at home, students are at home, because we've not disbursed those funds. Mr. Speaker, without that, I think this sitting should be suspended until further notice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, honorable members. Honorable Otienda Amolo, Senior Counsel. you have a legitimate point, but your prescription is unnecessarily drastic. We can resolve the issue without suspending our sitting, particularly on day one, when we want, in fact, to facilitate you to move the motion if you wish for members to debate. Number one, the letter you wrote, you addressed to the majority leader and the minority leader, only copied to Mr. Speaker. And it's those two leaders who would have then motioned the Speaker to call for a special sitting. None of them did. Order, honorable members, order. So it is not within the Speaker's competence to call for a special sitting. It's within the Speaker's competence to convene a special sitting when he has been motioned by a member, and it's the leadership. But it's now water under the bridge. We are sitting anyway. So we can allocate you time at an appropriate time, not today, so that you can discuss this important issue. Today being the first day, order CNN, I'm sure you know the standing orders. Today being the first day, we don't have a House Business Committee. So there is no business that has been approved and designated to be transacted. Understanding order number one, today after we've cleared the motion on House business, I will only exercise my discretion to allow the woman rep for Elgeyo Marakwet to make a statement on the tragedy that befell one of our most rising athletic stars. It will be a very short statement. I have approved it for the CDF issue. Tomorrow, if you wish, you can file a motion of adjournment, and I'll give you time to debate. But before we do that, I think we will allow the majority leader tomorrow to bring a statement on the issue of disbursement of CDF. I did